I'm Jacob, 37 male. I live in a quiet suburb now in a house that feels like a home, not a statement. My life is grounded in things that matter: family dinners, soccer games, and the simple peace of a Sunday morning. But this story isn't about the man I am today. It's about the man I used to be and the storm that tore his world apart. Just a few years ago, I had an empire, a penthouse overlooking the city, and a future so bright it was blinding. This is the story of how I lost all of it, and how in the depths of that failure, I discovered what it truly means to be successful. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Just 4 years ago, my reflection in the mirror was that of a different man. At 33, I was Jacob Miller, the founder and CEO of Aura Innovations, a company the media had dubbed the future of sustainable energy. That particular morning, my suit was Italian, perfectly tailored, and the tie was a slash of silk that cost more than most people's weekly groceries. It was a significant day. I was slated to be the keynote speaker at a global technology summit in San Francisco, an event where the brightest minds convened to map out the next decade of innovation. My company wasn't just a business, it was a movement. We were developing smart grid technology that promised to revolutionize how cities consumed power, making them cleaner, more efficient, and fundamentally smarter. I had built Aura Innovations from a concept scribbled on a napkin during a late-night study session in my college dorm. Now, it was a multi-million-dollar enterprise, a testament to my ambition and relentless drive. I was living the dream, perched at the very summit of success. As I finished with my tie, my wife, Clara, entered our bedroom holding a cup of freshly brewed coffee. "You look like you're about to conquer the world," she said, her smile as radiant as the morning sun pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows of our penthouse apartment. Clara was a pediatrician, brilliant and compassionate, with a quiet strength that could command a room more effectively than any booming voice. She was the anchor to my high-flying kite, the calm center of my chaotic world. We lived in a sprawling apartment that occupied the entire top floor of a gleaming skyscraper in the heart of the city. The view was breathtaking, a panoramic canvas of the skyline stretching out to the distant bay. Every morning felt like waking up on top of the world, a feeling I had grown dangerously accustomed to. The interior was a masterpiece of modern design, curated by Clara's impeccable taste. Sleek, minimalist furniture, museum-quality art, and a state-of-the-art kitchen, it was more than a home. It was a fortress of our achievements, a physical manifestation of our success. In the living room, the sounds of our children's laughter echoed off the polished hardwood floors. Our son, Liam, who was 8, was expertly navigating a miniature drone through an obstacle course of designer chairs. Sophie, our 6-year-old daughter, was curled up on a plush rug, deeply engrossed in a book about marine biology. They were my world, the true purpose behind the long hours and sleepless nights. Liam, with his boundless curiosity, would often pepper me with questions about energy grids and solar cells. Sophie, who had her mother's gentle spirit, loved to share facts about the deep-sea creatures she read about. They attended a top-tier private school, with a curriculum that included everything from coding classes to equestrian sports. Their lives were as perfect as I could possibly make them. Clara rested her hand on my arm, her touch grounding me. "Go on," she urged gently. "The world is waiting for its genius." I smiled, kissed her, and then knelt to give my kids a hug before I left. The elevator descended in a smooth, silent whisper, and as the doors opened to the lobby, a wave of profound satisfaction washed over me. Life was perfect. My sports car, a sleek dark blue machine, purred as I navigated the morning traffic. Today I was more than a CEO, I was a visionary, an icon of modern innovation. The Technology Summit was a grand affair held at a massive convention center teeming with the industry's elite, scientists, venture capitalists, and policymakers from every corner of the globe. I had rehearsed my speech for weeks, polishing every word until it shone. When I stepped onto the stage, the warmth of the spotlight felt like an embrace. It felt like home. I spoke of a future powered by clean energy, of cities that breathed, and of a world where technology served humanity in its purest form. The speech was a resounding success. After the summit, I headed back to the Aura Innovations headquarters, a stunning glass and steel structure in the financial district. My team greeted me with RS and a celebratory bottle of champagne. The office was buzzing with an electric energy, a shared sense of purpose and excitement. "We're not just building a company," I declared, raising my glass for a toast. "We're building a better future." The team erupted in applause, and in that moment I felt invincible. I was not just their boss, I was their leader, the captain of a ship sailing toward a brilliant horizon. Those were the golden days, a seamless, sun-drenched dream. But life is never a placid lake, it's an unpredictable ocean. Unseen beneath the shimmering surface of my perfect life, a storm was gathering its strength, preparing to unleash a torrent that would wash everything away. The accolades, the perfect family, the admiring glances, they were all just the beautiful, fragile prelude to a chapter of darkness I was completely unprepared to face. My perfect world was balanced on a knife's edge, and I was about to fall. The first tremor hit on a bleak winter morning. I was in my corner office, staring out at a sky the color of slate when my phone rang. It was David, our CFO, and the tension in his voice was so thick I could feel it through the receiver. "Jacob, we have a serious problem." He didn't need to elaborate, I knew what was coming. A sudden, unexpected hike in federal interest rates had sent shockwaves through the market. The generous tax credits our industry had depended on for years were slashed overnight. To make matters worse, several of our key investors, spooked by whispers of a global economic downturn, were pulling their funding. As David laid out the grim details, the air in my office felt like it was being vacuumed out. The weeks that followed were a blur of frantic meetings and sleepless nights. It was a slow-motion nightmare. Our cash flow, once a mighty river, had dwindled to a trickle. Bank loans we had taken out to fund our expansion were suddenly due, and the pressure was suffocating. I spent my days on the phone, desperately trying to secure new lines of credit, calling in favors from people who had once praised me as a visionary at lavish galas. But the same people who had eagerly shaken my hand were now screening my calls. My emails went unanswered. The warmth of their admiration had been replaced by a chilling silence. I learned a hard lesson in those weeks. The halo of success is a fickle light, easily extinguished by the cold winds of financial reality. The betrayal wasn't personal, it was business. But it felt like a dagger in the back. Eventually, I ran out of options. The inevitable arrived in the form of our corporate lawyer, a man with a perpetually somber expression and a voice that was flat and devoid of emotion. He slid a thick stack of documents across the polished surface of my conference table. "Jacob," he said, his tone clinical, "given the circumstances, filing for bankruptcy is the only logical path forward." I stared at the papers, the word bankruptcy seeming to leap off the page. It felt like a death sentence. I had poured my entire being into Aura Innovations, sacrificing family time, sleep, and my own well-being to build it from the ground up. Now I was being asked to sign its obituary. "Is there no other way?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The lawyer simply shook his head, his expression impassive. I picked up the pen, my hand trembling so badly I could barely form the letters of my own name. Each stroke felt like it was carving a piece out of my soul. When I finally left the office building that afternoon, a cold rain had begun to fall, plastering my hair to my forehead and seeping through my expensive coat. It was as if the sky itself was weeping for my shattered dream. That night I sat alone in my empty office, the once vibrant space now quiet and cavernous. The glowing Aura logo on the wall, once a symbol of my pride, now seemed to mock me. The exodus began soon after. Employees, sensing the ship was sinking, started to leave one by one. The lively hum of the office was replaced by an eerie silence, broken only by the lonely whir of the server room and the echo of my own footsteps. The final blow came when a team from the bank arrived to liquidate our assets. I watched, numb and powerless, as they dismantled everything: the custom-built workstations, the advanced lab equipment, even the company's sign at the entrance. I had an overwhelming urge to scream, to fight them, to unleash the rage and despair coiling in my gut. But I did nothing. I just stood there, my hands jammed into my pockets, biting my lip to keep the tears at bay. A young man from the bank, trying to be kind, approached me. "I'm very sorry, Mr. Miller," he said softly. I couldn't respond. I just turned and stared out the window at the relentless rain. The collapse of Aura Innovations was just the beginning. The fallout bled into my personal life with devastating speed. The bank foreclosed on our penthouse, the beautiful sanctuary we had called home. We were forced to move into a small, rented house in a rundown suburban neighborhood where the streets were cracked and the fences were rusted. The house had a permanent scent of mildew, and the walls were stained with yellowish watermarks. Clara did her best to make it feel like a home, hanging new curtains and placing potted plants by the windows, but I could see the light dimming in her eyes. I sold everything of value: my car, Clara's SUV, our expensive watches, the designer furniture. Each item I parted with felt like another piece of my identity being stripped away. I went from driving a high-performance sports car to a clunky 10-year-old sedan whose engine made a horrible grinding noise every time I started it. A constant, humiliating reminder of my failure. Liam and Sophie had to transfer from their elite private school to the local public school. The memory of Liam's first day there is seared into my brain. He held my hand in a death grip, his eyes glued to the pavement. "I don't like it here, Dad," he whispered, his small voice trembling. I knelt down, forcing a smile I didn't feel. "It's just for a little while, buddy. I promise I'll get you back to your old school." The words tasted like ash in my mouth because I knew deep down that it was a lie. Clara, my steadfast partner, started to change. At first, she was my rock, insisting that we would overcome this together. But the relentless financial pressure began to wear her down. She took on extra shifts at the hospital, coming home late, exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes. She was carrying the weight that I was supposed to be carrying, and the guilt was eating me alive. Her family, who had once boasted about their brilliant son-in-law, now openly showed their disdain. Her father, Marcus Thorne, a retired investment banker with a permanent air of judgment, called me a disgrace. During a tense family dinner, he fixed me with his icy glare. "You were the pride of this family, Jacob," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "Now you're nothing but a parasite living off my daughter's hard work." I sat there, gripping my fork, every muscle in my body screaming. My brother-in-law, Julian, a smug corporate lawyer, was even more cruel. He saw my downfall as a source of amusement. "Remember when you were on the cover of that business magazine, Jacob?" He sneered at another family gathering, swirling a glass of expensive wine. "And now look at you. My sister is working herself to the bone while you sit around." Clara was standing nearby. She heard every word, but she remained silent. Her silence was the deepest betrayal of all. The weeks bled into months, each day a fresh wave of humiliation. I was no longer the Jacob Miller from the magazine covers. I was a ghost haunting the ruins of my own life. The scorn from my in-laws was a constant grinding pressure, but it was Clara's silence that truly broke me. I knew she was caught in an impossible position, torn between her family and her failing husband. But every time Marcus or Julian landed a verbal blow and she said nothing, it felt like she was choosing them over me. I hid the depth of my despair from the children, plastering on a brave face, but at night I would lie awake, staring at the water-stained ceiling of our rental, the same questions tormenting me. Where did I go wrong? Was I too arrogant? Did I expand too fast? Or was I simply not the genius everyone thought I was? The questions were a corrosive acid, dissolving what little self-worth I had left. One morning, after a particularly brutal phone call with a debt collector, I felt an overwhelming need to escape. I packed a small bag, told Clara I was going to look for job opportunities out of state, and boarded a bus to my hometown. It was a lie, of course. I wasn't looking for a job, I was running away. It had been years since I'd been back to the small, rural town where I grew up. It was a place of simple dreams and hardworking people, a world away from the cutthroat ambition of the city. I had left as the town's golden boy, the kid who was going to make it big. Now I was returning as a broken man, crushed by a shame so heavy it felt physically difficult to breathe. The bus pulled into a dusty station, and as I stepped off, the familiar scent of hay and damp earth filled my lungs. The town looked almost exactly as I remembered it. The old general store with its peeling paint, the giant oak tree at the center of the town square, the quiet streets lined with modest houses. It was like stepping into a time capsule, a painful reminder of a simpler, more hopeful time. I walked the familiar route to my parents' house at the end of a gravel road. It was a small, single-story home with a welcoming porch where my mother grew her prize-winning roses. When I knocked, she opened the door, and her initial look of surprise quickly melted into one of deep concern. "Jacob," she breathed, pulling me into a hug that felt like the first moment of genuine warmth. Age I had experienced in months. My father came out from the living room, his hair grayer than I remembered, but his smile was the same. "Son, you should have told us you were coming," he said, his hand clapping my shoulder with a reassuring firmness. They didn't press me for details, but I could see the questions in their eyes. They led me to the kitchen, a cozy space that smelled of cinnamon and baked bread. My mother placed a cup of coffee and a plate of cookies in front of me, the same way she had when I was a boy coming home from school. I tried to keep up the pretense, talking vaguely about restructuring and new ventures. I told them Clara and the kids were fine, that we were just going through a transitional period, but I could tell they didn't believe me. My mother's gentle gaze saw right through the facade. "You look exhausted, honey," she said, her voice soft with worry. I wanted to deny it, to insist I was the same capable son they had always been proud of, but the lie caught in my throat. I could only nod, staring into my coffee cup to hide the tears welling in my eyes. My father, a man of few words, simply stood up and placed a hand on my shoulder. "Whatever it is, Jacob," he said, his voice low and steady, "you're home now, you're our son." Those words, so simple and unconditional, shattered the last of my defenses. I wasn't a failure to them. I was just their son. That night, lying in my childhood bed, staring at the same ceiling I had stared at as a boy dreaming of the future, I finally slept through the night without the torment of nightmares. The next morning, my parents didn't offer advice or platitudes. Instead, my mother asked me to help her in the garden. We spent hours weeding and watering her plants, the simple, repetitive work calming my racing mind. For a few hours, the crushing weight of my failures lifted. But I knew this peace was temporary. That afternoon, my father called me into the living room. He was holding a small, worn tin box, the box where they kept their life savings. It's not much, he said, opening the lid to reveal several neat stacks of cash. But we want you to take it, to help you get back on your feet. I stared at the money, a lump forming in my throat. I knew exactly where that money had come from. It was the money I had sent them over the years, back when I was the successful CEO, back when I thought my fortune was endless. Now they were offering my own money back to me. It wasn't just cash, it was a symbol of how completely I had failed, of my inability to provide for anyone, even myself. I can't take this, I choked out, pushing the box away. The shame was a physical thing, a bitter taste in my mouth, but my mother took my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. This isn't for you, she said, her eyes firm. It's for Liam and Sophie. They need their father to be strong. This money will give you some breathing room. Take it for them. Her words disarmed me. I couldn't argue. I bowed my head and accepted the tin box, the weight of it feeling heavier than gold. On the bus ride back to the city, the shame and gratitude warred within me. The bus rumbled on, and a dark, insidious thought began to creep into my mind. I had a substantial life insurance policy, one I had taken out during my peak years at Aura. The thought was chilling, but in my desperate state, it presented itself as a twisted kind of solution. If I were gone, the payout would be enough. Clara could pay off the debts. Liam and Sophie could go back to their old school. They could have the life they deserved, a life I could no longer provide. The idea took root, a cold and logical calculation in a mind hollowed out by despair. As the bus slowed for a stop in a desolate, windswept town, I made a decision. I got off, leaving my bag on the seat. I didn't know how I would do it, only that I couldn't go on. I stood by the side of the road, the cold wind whipping around me, feeling nothing but a profound emptiness. Just as I was about to walk towards the nearby overpass, a sleek black car pulled up beside me, its tires crunching on the gravel shoulder. The door opened, and a man in a perfectly tailored suit stepped out. He had a smile that was both familiar and startling. "Jacob Miller," he said, his voice a warm and confident baritone. "Still look like you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders." I stared, my mind struggling to place him. And then it hit me. Leo Sterling, an old college friend, a fellow dreamer from a time before success and failure had defined me. I had lent him a significant amount of money a decade ago to start his own tech company, and then we'd lost touch as my life accelerated. Now here he was, the picture of success, while I stood on the brink of oblivion. My discovery was complete. I had found rock bottom. "Leo," I whispered, the name feeling foreign on my tongue. He strode toward me and pulled me into a hug, clapping me on the back as if no time had passed at. "Oh man, it has been too long," he laughed, his energy infectious. I remained stiff, a wave of shame washing over me. I didn't want him, of all people, to see me like this, a bankrupt failure in worn-out clothes, standing on the side of a highway with a head full of dark thoughts. He looked at me, his sharp gaze taking in my disheveled appearance, and his smile softened with understanding. It was as if he could see the entire tragic story without me having to say a word. "Where are you headed, Jacob?" he asked, his tone gentle. I couldn't meet his eyes. "Just back to the city," I mumbled, the lie feeling flimsy and transparent. He nodded slowly, sensing my evasion. "Get in," he said, gesturing to the open car door. "We're going to get some coffee. We need to talk." I hesitated, glancing down the road where the bus had already become a distant speck. The bleak plan I had been forming moments ago still lingered, a tempting whisper promising an end to the pain. But there was a sincerity in Leo's voice, a genuine concern that made it impossible to refuse. I climbed into the passenger seat, the smell of expensive leather and success a stark, bitter contrast to my own reality. As Leo pulled the car smoothly back onto the road, I didn't know it yet, but his sudden, almost miraculous appearance was a turning point. It was a single, fragile ray of light piercing through an otherwise impenetrable darkness. We drove to a small diner in the next town over. It was a humble place with cracked vinyl booths and the comforting smell of brewing coffee. I followed Leo inside, feeling out of place like an actor who had forgotten his lines. He ordered 2 black coffees and slid one across the table to me. He didn't press or pry. He just sat there, his patient gaze creating a safe space. "Okay, Jacob," he said finally, his voice calm. "Tell me everything, the real story." I took a long sip of the hot coffee, the warmth doing little to thaw the ice in my chest. I didn't want to recount my failures, to expose my vulnerabilities to someone who had once looked up to me, but his quiet patience wore down my defenses. So I began to talk. The words came out in a torrent, a messy, painful confession of my downfall. I told him about the market crash, the investors who had abandoned me, and the crushing weight of the bankruptcy. I described the shame of losing our home, of seeing my children forced into a new and unfamiliar school. Finally, my voice cracking, I told him about the relentless mockery from my in-laws, the way Marcus called me a parasite and Julian sneered at my failure. I confessed how Clara's silence in those moments felt like a betrayal. I didn't tell him about the life insurance policy or the thoughts I'd been having just before he arrived, but I didn't have to. His eyes, full of empathy, told me he understood just how close to the edge I had come. He listened to the entire story without interruption, his expression serious. When I finally finished, my throat raw, he leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. You know, Jacob, he said, his voice firm and steady, I wouldn't be where I am today if it weren't for you. You lent me that startup capital when no bank would even look at me. You took a chance on me. That kindness, it fundamentally changed the course of my life. I just shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. That was a long time ago, Leo. Look at me now, I have nothing left. He didn't let my self-pity stand. He reached across the table and gripped my shoulder. You're wrong, he said, his voice ringing with conviction. You're still Jacob Miller, the guy who built Aura Innovations from scratch, the guy who saw the future when no one else did. This failure doesn't define you. It's just a chapter, Jacob. It's not the end of your book. His words were a lifeline. He then began to tell me about his company, Nexus Dynamics, a firm at the forefront of developing advanced AI-driven energy solutions, a field directly related to my expertise. I need you, Jacob, he said, his eyes blazing with purpose. I'm not offering you a handout, I'm offering you a partnership. I want you to come work with me to lead a new division. We can do incredible things together. I stared at him, bewildered. Leo, I just declared bankruptcy. My reputation is in tatters. I'm a risk. You don't want someone like me. But he just laughed, the sound warm and genuine. You're not a risk, he insisted. You're an asset. You have experience, resilience, and integrity. You can't buy those things. I trust you, Jacob. That's all that matters. He pulled a sleek metal business card from his wallet and pushed it across the table. Here's what we're going to do, he said, outlining a plan. First, my legal team is going to handle your most pressing debts. We'll get the creditors off your back so you can breathe. Then I want you to come to San Francisco, meet my team at Nexus, and see what we're working on. No pressure, just investigate. The possibility. I picked up the card, the cool metal, a solid, tangible thing in my trembling hand. Leo Sterling, CEO, Nexus Dynamics. It felt surreal. A part of me wanted to refuse, to tell him I wasn't worthy of his faith, that I would only let him down again. But another, smaller part of me, the part that was the old Jacob Miller, felt a tiny spark ignite. It wasn't hope, not yet, but it was a chance, it was a way out. That evening, I returned to the small rental house, my mind reeling. Clara was in the kitchen, her posture slumped with fatigue after a long shift. Liam and Sophie were already in bed. I told her everything, the chance encounter with Leo, his incredible offer, his unwavering belief in me. She listened intently, but I could see the fear and doubt in her eyes. Are you sure, Jacob? She asked, her voice fragile. After everything you've been through, what if it doesn't work out? Her hesitation was understandable, but it still stung. She had witnessed my complete collapse. She was afraid to hope again. I don't know if it will work, I admitted, taking her hand. But I have to try, for us, for the kids. She nodded, but the doubt lingered. I knew then that I had to do this not just for myself, but to win back her faith. A few days later, a woman from Leo's legal team arrived at our door. She handed me a file. Mr. Sterling has settled your outstanding bank debts, she explained professionally. The legal pressure is off. A huge weight lifted from my shoulders, but it was replaced by the heavy burden of accepting such a monumental favor. Leo didn't give me time to wallow. He sent me a plane ticket to San Francisco. Just come and see, his text read. Investigate your future. As the plane lifted off the runway, I looked down at the sprawling city below, feeling as if I was leaving a part of my broken self behind. When I landed, Leo was there to greet me, his trademark confident smile on his face. Welcome to the next chapter, he said, clapping me on the shoulder. I wasn't sure I was ready, but as I followed him out of the airport, I felt that tiny spark flicker into a small, steady flame. Leo drove me directly to the Nexus Dynamics headquarters, a shimmering glass tower that pierced the Silicon Valley skyline. It was a monument to success, a world I had once inhabited but now felt like a foreign country. As we walked through the bustling lobby surrounded by energetic young employees, Leo spoke with pride. This is where the magic happens, he said, and you're going to be a crucial part of it. He introduced me to the head of HR, a sharp professional woman who handed me an employee badge. I stared at the plastic card, Jacob Miller, Project Director. It felt like an artifact from a past life. Leo laid out the plan. I would be leading a new high-stakes project focused on optimizing solar energy storage using their proprietary AI. Your experience with grid management at Aura is exactly what we need, he explained. You know how to lead a team through a crisis. I trust you to make this a success. Despite his confidence, a heavy sense of inadequacy weighed on me. The Nexus office was a hive of activity, whiteboards covered in complex algorithms, teams huddled in intense collaboration, a relentless pace of innovation. This wasn't the glamorous world of keynote speeches and media interviews I had known at Aura's peak. This was the trenches, the hard, gritty work of building something new. I felt like an imposter. My team consisted of a dozen brilliant engineers, most of them at least a decade younger than me. They spoke in a language of code and technical jargon that I had to spend my nights researching just to keep up. I could feel their curious stares, could sense their unspoken questions. They knew who I was, the failed CEO of Aura Innovations. They were watching me, waiting to see if I would break. I knew I couldn't win them over with authority or past credentials. My reputation was worthless here, so I started with humility. I didn't dictate, I listened. I spent the first week reviewing every project document, sitting in on every team meeting, and having one-on-one conversations with each engineer. I admitted what I didn't know and asked them to teach me. I focused on what I did know: how to organize a complex project, how to foster collaboration, and how to turn a collection of brilliant individuals into a cohesive team. My experience at Aura, for all its painful lessons, had given me a deep understanding of process and people. Slowly, I began to apply that knowledge. The first major test came about a month into the project. A critical supplier of microcomponents unexpectedly went out of business, putting our entire production timeline in jeopardy. The team descended into a state of controlled panic. The meeting room was filled with anxious arguments and worst-case scenarios. All eyes turned to me. The old Jacob would have panicked too, but the man who had lost everything had earned a thing or two about crisis. I called for calm. I took a deep breath, walked to the whiteboard, and broke the problem down into manageable parts. I remembered the frantic calls I'd made during Aura's collapse and applied the lessons learned. I spent the next 72 hours working around the clock, leveraging old contacts, researching alternative suppliers, and negotiating new contracts. By the end of the third day, I had not only secured a new supplier, but had also negotiated a more favorable price, saving the project a significant amount of money. When I presented the solution to the team, the room went silent. Then one of the lead engineers, a brilliant young woman named Maya, broke the silence. "How on earth did you do that?" she asked, her expression a mix of astonishment and respect. "I thought we were dead in the water." A small smile touched my lips, the first flicker of my old confidence returning. "I've navigated rougher seas," I replied simply. "You just have to keep your head and refuse to sink." That moment was a turning point. The team's skepticism began to melt away, replaced by a growing respect. They started coming to me for advice, not just on management, but on technical challenges as well. They started calling me the anchor of the project, a nickname that filled me with a quiet pride. I wasn't chasing glory anymore. I was earning respect through hard work and competence. News of my new position inevitably reached my in-laws. Clara's mother called her one evening, her voice dripping with suspicion. "I heard Jacob is working for that wealthy friend of his," she said. "Still relying on others to clean up his messes, I see." I overheard the conversation and felt the familiar sting of their contempt. I clenched my jaw, but this time the anger was different. It wasn't helpless rage, it was a cold, quiet determination. I would prove them wrong, not with words, but with results. My plan was simple: succeed. Let my work be the undeniable answer to their scorn. Leo remained my staunchest supporter. He'd often drop by my office just to check in. "You're doing incredible work, Jacob," he'd say. "I knew you had it in you." His unwavering faith was the fuel that kept me going on the long nights when self-doubt crept back in. The project began to yield extraordinary results. We hit our first major milestone 3 weeks ahead of schedule. At a quarterly review meeting with key stakeholders, I presented our progress, my voice clear and steady. The data was undeniable. Our technology was outperforming all initial projections. As I concluded my presentation, the boardroom erupted in applause. Leo caught my eye and gave me a subtle nod of approval. As we were leaving the meeting, he whispered, "That's the Jacob Miller I remember." A few tech blogs and industry newsletters started mentioning my name again, this time in a different context. Jacob Miller, former CEO of the defunct Aura Innovations, is now spearheading a groundbreaking project at Nexus Dynamics, one article read. The narrative was shifting. I wasn't just the man who had failed, I was the man who was staging a comeback. I was executing my plan, brick by painful brick, rebuilding my career and my self-respect from the ground up. I knew a larger confrontation was inevitable, a moment when I would have to face my past and my detractors head-on. But for the first time in a very long time, I felt ready for it. The opportunity for that confrontation came sooner than I expected. Nexus Dynamics was a major sponsor of the annual North American Tech Summit, one of the most prestigious events in the industry. Leo informed me that our solar storage project was to be the centerpiece of Nexus's presentation, and he wanted me to be the one to present it on stage. "This is your project, Jacob," he said. "You've earned this. It's time for the world to see what you've built." My heart hammered against my ribs. The thought of stepping back into that kind of spotlight was terrifying. The last time I had been on a stage that large was for Aura Innovations just before the crash, but I knew Leo was right. This was a necessary step. The days leading up to the summit were a whirlwind of preparation. I worked tirelessly with my team to refine the presentation, ensuring every data point was perfect, every projection was sound. The night before the event, Clara called, her voice a mixture of excitement and anxiety. My father called, she said hesitantly. He and Julian received VIP invitations to the summit through one of Julian's clients. They're going to be there, Jacob. A cold dread washed over me. The thought of facing Marcus and Julian in a public setting on what was supposed to be my moment of professional redemption was nauseating. They think you're just Leo's puppet, Clara added softly. They're going there expecting to see you fail. I took a deep, steadying breath. Let them, I said, my voice firmer than I felt. They can watch, I told Clara. I loved her and hung up, a new resolve hardening within me. This was no longer just about my career, it was about reclaiming my dignity. The day of the summit, the convention center was electric with energy. The air buzzed with the chatter of thousands of attendees, investors, engineers, journalists. Backstage, I adjusted my tie, the simple gesture bringing back a flood of memories from that fateful day years ago. But this time I wasn't the invincible CEO, I was a survivor. Leo stood beside me, sensing my nerves. You're going to be brilliant, he said, clapping my shoulder. This isn't just about Nexus, this is your moment. When my name was called, I walked onto the stage, the bright lights momentarily blinding me. The auditorium was vast, a sea of faces looking up at me expectantly. I took a moment, found my footing, and began to speak. My voice was strong, carrying a conviction born not of arrogance but of experience. I spoke about the project, the technology, and the incredible work my team had done. I spoke of a future where energy was not just sustainable but intelligent and accessible to all. As I spoke, my eyes scanned the audience and then I saw them. They were sitting in the third row, Marcus with his arms crossed and his expression a mask of cold skepticism, Julian with a smug, knowing smirk plastered on his face. And next to them was Clara. Our eyes met across the distance, and I could see the conflict warring within her, the hope for my success and the fear of her family's judgment. Seeing them there, so confident in their verdict of me, ignited a fire in my belly. I pushed aside the anger and channeled it into my presentation. I spoke with a passion and clarity that held the audience captive. I wasn't just presenting data, I was telling a story of resilience and innovation. When I finished, a moment of silence hung in the air, and then the room erupted in a thunderous ovation. As I stepped down from the stage, my body buzzing with adrenaline, they approached me. Marcus led the charge, his voice loud enough for those nearby to hear. Quite a performance, Jacob, he said, his tone dripping with condescension. It's easy to look good when you're riding on someone else's coattails. How much of that was actually your work? Julian chimed in, his smirk widening. Don't be too hard on him, Dad. He's got to make a living somehow, even if it's as Leo Sterling's charity case. The words were like public lashings. People around us started to stare, their conversations falling silent. I saw Clara behind them, her face pale, her eyes pleading with me to walk away. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but before I could utter a word, Leo appeared at my side. He placed a hand on my shoulder and faced my in-laws, his expression calm but unyielding. I think you're mistaken, Leo said, his voice clear and commanding, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. Let me be perfectly clear. Nexus Dynamics would not have this breakthrough technology without Jacob Miller. He's not riding my coattails. In many ways, I've been riding his for years. He turned slightly to address the onlookers. Over a decade ago, when I was a broke kid with nothing but an idea, this man wrote me a check that saved my company. He believed in me when no one else would. He is the heart and soul of this project, and its success is a testament to his brilliance and his character. The auditorium was utterly silent. Marcus and Julian froze, their faces turning from smug superiority to stunned disbelief. They had no response. Leo's words had completely disarmed them. The crowd, having witnessed the entire exchange, began to applaud not for the presentation but for the raw, undeniable truth they had just heard. I looked at Clara and tears were streaming down her face. In that moment, I saw not a woman torn, but a woman seeing her husband, truly seeing him for the first time in years. I didn't have to say a single word in my own defense. My work and Leo's loyalty had spoken for me. After the confrontation, Leo pulled me aside and handed me a drink. See, he said with a wink. You'd already won, they just didn't know it yet. I nodded, but my victory felt bittersweet. The public humiliation of my in-laws was not my goal. But the public validation of my worth after so long was a profound and deeply healing moment. The confrontation was over, and I had emerged not as a victim, but as a man who had finally reclaimed his story. In the aftermath of the tech summit, the ripple effects were immediate and profound. The solar storage project became the talk of the industry. Investment offers poured into Nexus Dynamics, and partnership requests from major international firms landed on my desk. A prominent tech journal ran a feature story with the headline, "The Redemption of Jacob Miller, How a Fallen CEO Rewrote His Future." I politely declined the interview requests. I had learned the hard way that the spotlight is a fickle friend. My focus was no longer on public perception, but on the tangible results of my work and the slow, deliberate process of rebuilding my life. The project continued to exceed all expectations. We completed the final development phase months ahead of schedule, and the technology we had created was hailed as a genuine game changer. I found a deep satisfaction in the work itself. The late nights collaborating with my team, the thrill of solving complex problems, the quiet pride in seeing our creation come to life. Each small success was a stone laid in the new foundation of my self-respect. The most significant changes, however, happened away from the office. Clara flew out to visit me the weekend after the summit. The moment she saw me, she wrapped her arms around me, her hug fierce and full of an emotion that had been absent for too long. "I am so proud of you," she whispered, her voice thick with tears. "And I am so sorry, Jacob. I was weak. I should have defended you. I let my fear and my family's judgment get in the way." I held her close, feeling the walls that had grown between us finally crumble. "We were both just trying to survive," I said. "We found our way back, that's what matters." For the first time in years, it felt like we were a team again. We were rebuilding not just my career, but our home. I made a point to be more present for my children, even from a distance. We had video calls every night, and I made sure to fly home every other weekend. I listened intently as Liam described his latest science project and cheered as Sophie showed me her new gymnastics routine. I started sending more money home, enough to ease the financial strain and allow for small luxuries we had long since given up. Hearing the unrestrained joy back in their voices was more rewarding than any professional accolade. My parents, who had been my silent, steadfast supporters, were overjoyed. "We always knew you had it in you, son," my mother told me, her voice filled with pride. "I made sure to repay the money they had given me from the tin box, but they insisted I keep it." "That was never a loan," my father said. "It was an investment in our son." Their unwavering belief had been a lifeline in my darkest hour, and I would be forever grateful. As for my in-laws, their public humiliation at the summit was a bitter pill for them to swallow. Their social circle had witnessed their arrogance and my vindication. They lost face not because I sought revenge, but because their own pettiness was exposed for all to see. They became quiet. The condescending phone calls stopped. The mocking remarks ceased. Months later, Julian sent a terse, almost reluctant text to Clara. "Tell Jacob congratulations." I felt no triumph when she read it to me, only a quiet sense of closure. I didn't need their approval anymore. The lesson of karma had played out with perfect clarity. Leo's act of loyalty was the universe returning the kindness I had shown him a decade earlier. His belief in me was proof that a good deed is never truly lost. It simply waits for the right moment to come back to you. Conversely, the scorn and arrogance of Marcus and Julian had brought them nothing but their own shame. Standing on the balcony of my San Francisco apartment one morning, watching the sunrise paint the sky in hues of gold and pink, I felt a profound sense of peace. My journey had been a brutal one, from the dizzying heights of success to the crushing depths of failure. But in losing everything, I had gained something far more valuable, a true understanding of my own worth. It wasn't tied to my net worth, the car I drove, or the title on my business card. It was forged in resilience, integrity, and the courage to get back up after being knocked down. I want to leave you with this thought: for anyone who might be feeling lost or at their lowest point, never let your circumstances define you, and never let the judgment of others become your reality. The same people who kick you when you are down will often be the first to seek your favor when you rise. The most powerful response to injustice is not revenge, but success on your own terms. Live with kindness, not for the reward, but because the seeds of goodwill you plant today might just become the forest that shelters you tomorrow. I stand here today not as a celebrated CEO or a cautionary tale of failure. I am simply Jacob, a father, a husband, and a man who learned that true success isn't about reaching the top, but about having the strength to climb back from the bottom.